Welcome to the Weaver's Way.
Hi friends, in today's video I wanted to show you some of the different ways that you can shuffle a deck, and specifically I wanted to show you the sideways or waterfall cascade technique that I use. I sometimes have issues with my joints and arthritis, so I thought this might be helpful for those of you that have issues with your hands or are looking for, maybe you have small hands and you're looking for an alternative to the riffle shuffle or the sideways overhand shuffle that are usually demonstrated on a lot of tutorials. So I've gathered a few different decks that will show you the way that this method works for different cardstock types. So here I have the Oak, Ash, and Thorn, which is a thicker, more rigid type of cardstock. I have the, the Witch Sister by Julia Jeffrey. This is very flexible. And then the Seasons of the Witch Beltane Oracle, which compared to a tarot card is much larger. And so I wanted to show how this technique can be very helpful whether you have small hands or you struggle maybe with hand strength and rigid cardstock is difficult. And I also find that this method is very gentle on the cardstock. So as you can see, my cards tend to stay in great shape because this technique does not bend the cards a lot like other methods do. And for the most part, I've had this deck a couple of years now and the edges stay in pretty good shape as well. So I find that this technique is really gentle both on your hands and your decks, and is why it's my preferred method. I will show at the end of this video a few different other techniques that you can try that are more common, but because there aren't a lot of tutorials that I've found on TarotTube about this technique, I wanted to go ahead and offer a demonstration, and I'll attempt to go slowly enough so that you can really see how this technique functions. So let's start with the Oak, Ash, and Thorn here. This is, as I said, a thicker cardstock. And so as you'll see, if you try to riffle shuffle this one, it gets really unwieldy. Now, I do have small hands, but it's very unwieldy. So I wanted to demonstrate first with the Oak, Ash, and Thorn. This deck does have more rigid cardstock, and so this is how I would shuffle this deck with the sideways cascade. You would grip either side of the deck with your hands, your thumbs on one side and the other three fingers, and then your first finger will either go at the top or tucked in, your preference. And then you slowly pull your thumbs across the deck. Let me do it with half so you can see what I'm doing. The motion is just gently releasing your thumb across the deck. And as you do so, you let it fall. It's more about releasing the tension between your fingers and allowing the cards to fall where they may. And so when you do this with both, as you can see, for the most part, it's pretty consistent. Sometimes I'll have some that get stuck where they were released at the same second. And then you can just slide them together and then that's shuffled. So once again, I'll show you a little bit faster here. And as you can see, not a lot of bend in the cards. So let me demonstrate that with a more flexible cardstock, like with the Witch Sister. This is a Llewellyn deck, so the cardstock is much bendier. So again, let's get more of a half in here. And then so you're gonna grip on either side and just slide your thumbs up the deck. Really, these hands are just here to support the cards from flying everywhere. Let me show that again for you. So two hands. I like to tuck my forefingers, but that's just because I have long nails at this point. When they're shorter, I don't. And so you're just releasing your thumbs up the side of the deck. One more time. And because this is much more gentle on my hands, here, I'll show you with the forefingers. Because this is so much more gentle on days when I'm having more arthritis, It's very gentle on my hands. So with a larger deck like an Oracle, this is the Beltane Oracle. And so same thing, you can adjust your finger placement based on the size of the cards. The thing here is you don't need a lot of grip strength because your entire hand is holding the cards. And then again, just slowly pulling your thumb. These are a little stickier because they are glossy. And so let me show that to you again. And so I understand that overhand shuffle works really well, but for times when I'm trying to really mix up the cards, like when I first get a deck, or specifically for tarot, if I put them in order and then I'm trying to randomize them again, I find that the sideways Cascade is both gentle on my hands and effective at randomizing the cards again and truly giving a shuffle. So for me, it's super fast once I've gotten more adept at it. So let me show that again at faster speed. And so to me, it's almost as fast as the traditional Riffle shuffle. So besides the sideways Cascade that I just showed you, that's my preferred method, there are other ways to shuffle the deck. I find that the Riffle shuffle really works best for this more flexible cardstock. This is the kind of casino style that I was taught when I learned how to shuffle playing cards, but you will place 2 to 3 fingers on the back of the deck, thumbs at the top, long ways, and then your first fingers get tucked along the backs, and you bend the cards as you pull the thumbs up, and that gives you a near perfect one-to-one between the cards in the left hand and the cards in the right hand. I can't seem to get that back one up. The problem that I find with this method is, yes, you'll get a great mix of, if you choose to do reversals, it'll start to randomize your reversals, or you can flip it so that they're in the same direction. But if you're doing reversals, this makes it a lot easier to not have to think about introducing reversals into your deck. But the trade-off for me is that it's much more bendy to the cards. And so you'll start to notice a bowing of the cardstock as you do this method more and more. To counter that, you can, let's see if I can not drop all these very slippery, glossy cards here. You can do it then in the reverse and hope that it starts to even out the tension that you've introduced into the cardstock. I find that this is not worth it because then you start to notice some bowing of certain sections and not others based on where they were in the deck when you did that. So for me, it's not worth the damage when I have a better method. But if you like that crispy sound, this is a perfectly fine method. It's very common. Another common technique is simply the overhand shuffle, where you take your hand wide, you pick up a section, and you slowly place a few cards at a time overhand. And to me, this is kind of like the long ways overhand, or the short ways overhand, and then you can also do the overhand method like this, where the cards go with the short end in your left hand and you're pulling them across the length of the card. I find that because my hands are small, this is a very awkward technique for me, because I then have to be able to pull the entire length of the card and not stick them on each other if I speed this up at all. So I guess if you're trying to slow down, this method can be really helpful, but for me, this direction feels much more comfortable for standard card sizes. Now, when you get into like more long and narrow cards, that changes a bit for me, and I tend to just go back to the Cascade style. But I wanted to show that as a method too. Another method that you'll sometimes see people do is where they just simply mix them and it kind of like, you'll see here, some people call this like the washing machine technique or whatever, where you're just randomly putting them on a hard surface and then mixing them. The only thing that I don't like about this, it's good for reversals, but then it's kind of hard to then not drop them, and it can take a bit longer to truly get them randomized. And there's, if you have gilding on the side, you do risk some damage to the gilding by bumping them up against each other like that. There's also the method of laying down stacks and then just picking them up randomly. I've seen that method as well, and that's fine. I don't think that there's, the thing I think again with that method is it does take longer to randomize them. I've heard that if you do the standard riffle shuffle or the sideways cascade, if it's a 1-to-1, I've heard from casino dealers that on their channels, they've said if you do that 1-to-1 method 10 times, you'll have a truly randomized deck. I don't know how true that is. That's hearsay on the internet, so take it as you will. But I find that those methods do ensure a bit more randomization of the cards, and so for me, it feels like I've done a good job of resetting the deck between spreads. So these are a few of the methods that are very common, and again, my sideways cascade, I learned about this from a different older video and kind of modified it for my own use. If I can find that older video, I will link it in the description. I hope this has been helpful. If you have questions, drop them in the comments.
This is the Weaver's Way. Thanks for watching.